Now that you have a properly packed column, it's time to load the sample. And this step is really, really important for getting good separation of your components. So we had a little bit of solvent on top of the column, and the first thing to do before you load the column is to just take the meniscus and lower it below the surface of the sand. Remember, not below the silica gel, just below the surface of the sand. So I'm going to open the stopcock and let it slowly drain. Till the meniscus and there it reaches the sand, and now I'm going to close the stopcock. All right. The objective with the sample is to dissolve it in a solvent that it's very soluble in and that you can use a minimal amount of. Remember that if you need to determine the mass of your sample and you don't know it from the start, a good thing to do is to weigh the vial and the cap before you transfer it to the column, and then afterwards you can check the difference to know what the total mass is that you put on the column. So here we have a sample, the ferrocene acetylferrocene, and we're going to dissolve it in a small amount of methylene chloride. You want to make sure you have a good bulb on your pipette and add the methylene chloride dropwise. Shaking it a little. So that we use the minimal amount necessary. The objective is to get this sample on the column in as small as bandwidth as possible. So I think I just need a little bit more methylene chloride. Shake. Right, and that looks pretty good. All right, next you want to hold the vial really close to the column and carefully draw the sample, the whole sample, up into the vial. Make sure we have a good seal. Very carefully go down through the column, trying not to touch the edges. Place it on the top of the sand and add it dropwise to the column. Okay, and carefully pull your pipette up. And the next thing you want to do is open the stopcock and once again move the meniscus down, and you can see that the sample slowly goes onto the sand and down to the silica gel. And close it once it reaches, the meniscus reaches the top of the sand. All right, you can see that we haven't transferred all the solvent, so I'm going to use just a small amount more, and you want to use a fresh pipette now for the methylene chloride. And add a little bit to your vial. And do some rinses. And once again, very carefully add it to the column. Not touching the sides and adding it dropwise. All right. And slowly open the column, moving the sample in the band on the top. All right, the next thing is we want to introduce the solvent that we're going to do the elution of the column with. And I'm going to use that to make sure, as we rinse carefully without disturbing the sand, add a little to the top, and you can see that the solution is slightly yellow. And what I know is if the sample is all on the column, we shouldn't see any color in that solution. So I'm going to add a small amount, push it onto the column, and repeat this process. And my goal is that once I add this solvent, it should be nice and clear, giving me an indication that all the samples on the column and none is adhered to the side, and the bands will separate cleanly and not be any of the compound mixed with the solvent. So I'm going to do it one more time. And that's looking pretty clear, and I'm pretty confident that I have all my sample pushed onto the column to get a nice separation of the components. And there I have a nice clear eluting solvent on top. Then you're ready to fill the column and start running your column chromatography.